Welcome to Backmarkers episode 6 with Kia and Hun, the slowest motorsport podcast in the world. Probably. This week, we're back, a little bit later than scheduled, to look at the Melbourne Grand Prix, which is an enthralling one, and I'm joined this week by a very special guest. Sam Ryder is in this week. Sam Ryder is here, as you can see. Very exciting times. AKA Matt, MC Palms. Palmer. How you doing, Matt?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, filling in for Hun while she's unwell at the moment. So wish her all the best. And yeah, thanks for. Well, I was going to cover you while you were up in Scotland, and I was going to cover with Hun, and then suddenly there's been a driver swap with you two. So that was the reserve.
Had to call on our reserve driver anyway, despite the shake-ups in the first team. That's for sure. Made a few exchanges, a few substitutions, and we've still got star guest in this week. So very pleased, very pleased. Obviously, we hope Hun gets well soon as well and be back soon. Of course. So yeah, we had a very, very exciting and unusual Melbourne Grand Prix because it stayed dry the whole time, which the same couldn't be said for the whole weekend. But it was a dry race and it was anything but normal. So I guess we ought to start from the top, right? And have a look at the dominant teams so far this season and look at Red Bull in terms of their performance. And I guess, extremely impressive once again. Have Max coming out with a pole to flag victory. Not quite though, due to Merc, but a really strong performance from him. And a really strong drive from Sergio as well to come up to P5, I believe. So a very, very strong performance.
Yeah, because Sergio had a brake issue, didn't he, in qualifying, and then managed to make his way up through the grid. But the speed of that Red Bull, I mean, probably. I'm not discounting Sergio, but pretty much any driver could probably at least get into the points with that Red Bull, starting from the back. Yeah, and then Max just sort of made a mockery of everyone because he sort of like 9 laps from the end, he sort of went off, and the gap came down from Russell to about 5 seconds, and then he just pulled that gap back out again. Just like he wasn't.
Didn't take much.
Yeah, he sort of like was just having a nice Sunday drive. Yeah, so
it's just so easy, wasn't it? It looks so easy again. And it's not. That's not unusual this season so far. He's driven. He almost looked effortless at times at Bahrain and Saudi, and it's sort of the same thing again, except for the start, which definitely didn't go to script really. With the jump by both both Mercs within the first few meters, really. I mean, I guess you can call it that. But easily the first sector, they both found their way past him. So I'm not quite sure what it was that led to Max falling behind the two Mercs the way he did. But yeah, it didn't take him long to get back through. And he didn't even need DRS either. So he just drove past him like he did with the DRS Open at Saudi. Just look effortless, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, the Red Bull is just so much quicker. And I think it just spoke volumes, I think, particularly in Saudi, when you saw Verstappen just go past, and Martin Brundle, who's been commentating for about 25 years now, just goes, wow. Like that says it all. Just a veteran commentator just goes, that is unbelievable at that speed difference.
Yeah. He's watched Lewis Hamilton's growth, especially those days when he was just coming into F1, and he commented on the famous 2008 championship victory at Brazil, and he said, wow, about that. So it speaks volumes, doesn't it, about how utterly dominant in this era Red Bull are, because I stress that the fastest car is still the W11, built by Mercedes in 2020, I think. So that is still remains to be the fastest Formula 1 car ever built. But in this era of ground effect, it's Red Bull that are really setting the pace and really getting the most out of that car. And frankly, Newey is just proving himself to be more and more of a genius when this car continues to be dominant everywhere, frankly, apart from the start.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's more down to the drivers than than Adrian Newey's design having the start, which Max got in trouble for at one of the restarts because he was pulled really far forward
Hmm,
in his grid box. And I
weird.
saw, and well, I didn't see it initially, but I saw people shouting about it on Twitter, the cesspit that Twitter is, and people were like, "Well, surely that's a penalty." I was like, "Well, no, because I remember him doing that in Japan." And Ted Kravitz going to the grid box and going, "You can be on that white line as long as you don't start rolling or moving past the sensor in your grid box. You are
Hmm.
fine."
Right, exactly, and that's the point, isn't it? He was still in the box.
Yeah,
The yellow line
it's
is
just a
merely a
guide. Yeah,
guide. Yeah, that's just so they know where to put their tyre. He was still in the limits. It's where the tyres are. It's where the contact patch of the tyre is. So in that respect, there was no problem whatsoever. It just, he was so far forward, it was like, hang on a minute. That seems very brave and almost bordering on the rule, surely. But this is it. It was bordering on the rule, but it was within it.
yeah.
And there's frankly no complaints, I guess. And he, if anything, he got it dead right.
Yeah, because like I said, I remember him doing that in Japan, and Sky had sent Ted Kravitz out to explain why it was fine. I can't remember what year. I can't remember if there was an investigation on it or not. But he basically went, "It's fine." He was millimeters within the safe zone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he absolutely is spot on. And I guess looking at his teammate as well, Sergio, obviously having a tough time with the brakes issue, he still came through and really delivered as well, albeit with the most dominant car on the grid, as we know. But you still have to find those opportunities, and when you're in a race, which I haven't mentioned yet, but most will know, there was 3 red flags. Not easy to get that momentum going. At least 2 of the red flags were near the end of the race anyway, so he had plenty of time to make up that ground. But the sort of moves that Sergio was pulling off, again, it's where Max passed the Merc for the lead. It was in those same places, but much, much braver by the looks of it, because it was almost heading to the entry, and Sergio was pulling off these moves
Yeah,
right through the midfield. It's really impressive. 11 and 12, I think.
turn 11 and 12. So
Oh,
it's
it's
around the outside a lot of the time.
9 and 10 now.
Yeah, turn 10 maybe. Yeah, yeah,
Sorry, yeah, it's 9 and 10. But yes, you're right. Yeah,
around
sorry.
the outside a lot of the time as well, which was really impressive because you struggle a lot of the time, obviously, because inside line is tighter, therefore shorter. But he was just getting the traction down over everybody, and considering as well that the next one is a right-hander, so he'd still be on the outside, but he just had the pace to pull away and get in front of them before the next corner.
That's right. Yeah, again, it was almost like, who cares about DRS? Too quick. Yeah, Max is pulling moves without DRS, and Sergio's pulling moves without DRS. It's just that quick.
DRS would have helped.
So impressive.
DRS would have helped Sergio get into that position because that's the end of a DRS zone. But it was more the fact he went around the outside of these people rather than trying to go down the inside. Like was it Lando did it to Hulkenberg? I think there was a good move down the inside there, and they were side by side. The next one, Hulk went wide.
Yeah, I recall seeing that one actually. It was towards the end of the race, wasn't it? And he went for a really, really lovely move. Considering the weaknesses of that McLaren this year, it was really impressive to see him pull that move the way he did, for sure. But I don't know if this is maybe a difference in strategy at the time, but still very impressive considering where they were and have been. Yeah, an extremely dominant day for Red Bull, but was a very promising start for Mercedes, who got, as I mentioned, got the jump straight away on Max off the start. Particularly Lewis first, I recall correctly, and then George later on through Sector 1. They both managed to find enough of an overlap to put the move on Max, and if anything, I would argue it looked like Max's tyres weren't quite up to temperature yet. He didn't look very confident. But either way, the Mercs got the jump initially.
They did, yeah. No, I think you got it the wrong way around. It was Russell first.
Was it Russell first?
And then Lewis, because later it then swapped because there was an incident later. There was an incident later, and George pitted under like safety car, or virtual safety car, or something. He pitted, and then they called the red flag, which completely screwed George. So Lewis got a free pit stop and kept in the lead. So yeah, so that's how Lewis
Yeah,
got
I'll tell
hold
you
of the
what,
lead. But
I think I remember now, it was Alex, wasn't it? I think Alex Albon went into the wall um, on lap 6, and they deployed a red flag, but prior to that, I think there was a pit stop for George.
yeah, there's definitely
So
a
they
pit
thought,
stop.
oh, well, let's
Yeah,
get him in early. Then he lost ground because they called the red, everyone could change their tyres anyway, so if anything, all he did was lose track position. So, yeah, it was a shame that, because as much as you could see where Merck were going with the strategy call for, well, let's get him on fresh tyres, I don't think usually a red flag is called straight away, but in this case, they thought, let him run a bit, and it's like, actually, we need a red now. By the time he was in the pits, then they called the red, so it was great. It's happened before in previous seasons. The last season specifically, I think I recall one example where, you've got cars out on track thinking, oh, it's probably going to be a safety car, or a virtual at least. They come into the pits, and then they called a red flag. In fact, it might have been Saudi last year where that happened. And it is a shame because all that hard work you put in is undone through ultimately decision making, because you could easily say, why wasn't the red flag called straight away? And that's been a big talking point quite often in previous discussions and podcasts and stuff. It's always come up. Like, what about this decision making? Because it cost Merck, I would argue.
yeah, definitely did. And yeah, and I think that was one of the big talking points, was like the inconsistency of the FIAs. Like there'd be a safety car for one thing, then there'd be a red flag, and then there'd be a situation where there was like another red flags might be with standing starts, and then they did it a rolling start, and it was just a lot of inconsistencies still with the FIA. I think
Yeah.
overall the decision at the end, I think, was right to red flag it again after the restart towards the end, after that absolute chaos, to then red flag it and then just drive around. I think that was the correct decision, even though it wasn't like a racing lap. Fans still got to see the cars. The race wasn't stopped early. Yeah, there was no reason to not go around. So, but yeah, the Mercs as well. Going back to Merc picking up first two races, they were sort of nowhere, and now they were P I think P2 and 3 in quali, and then on the George wasn't on the podium. His engine blew up halfway through, but
Yeah, sadly for him.
Lewis on the podium as well shows that Merc has
Mm.
suddenly has pace. I think they did have an upgrade. I think something was brought. If not more, otherwise I'm getting it confused with stuff being brought to Azerbaijan. But yeah, that Merc suddenly
It
found a bit of
wouldn't.
pace.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they had brought an upgrade, because it was a significant jump. I mean, just the mere fact that they found themselves ahead of Max on lap 1 speaks volumes about where the pace of the car is. And I don't think it's just down to setup. It can't be. That is a really big margin that they surely would have picked up on at the previous rounds. But they didn't. So there's support there for the idea that they will have brought an upgrade with them for sure. But as I say, whatever they had brought with them wasn't able to get George to the checker, even though he had such a strong start. And then strategy didn't go in his favour either. But, the heat of a day race in Australia certainly took its toll on that particular Merc, But, yeah, still a very strong performance, I would say. It's a very encouraging result for Mercedes, who, as you say, a bit off the boil in the first two rounds, I'd say. By their standards, they say it's an absolute failure. But as far as I'm concerned, there's signs that car is in a position to begin working its way back towards Red Bull, and they do have the budget to do it. They were beginning to last season as well. So yeah, extremely strong result for Lewis. But there was a lot of questions about the reaction from the team which I guess the word is subdued, I think. I don't know what your thoughts are, Matt, but I was hearing a lot of things about how maybe Merck weren't appreciating it as much as they should have under the circumstances, but it's an odd one. It sounds like rumours, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I haven't really heard these rumors, but you can see why be. It was second, wasn't it? They got with Lewis.
Second, that's right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they've been winning at the front since 20, 2014. They've been at the
Hmm.
front and they've been winning everything. They have the driver who has the most wins in history driving for them, so they're used to just constantly winning every race. So I guess anything less than that is a disappointment. Um, but yeah, if I know obviously if it was a different team like McLaren or Alpine, you get on the podium, you're elated because it's you've worked so
Hmm.
hard for that. And I think yeah, if it was subdued because they are used to it. I mean, they've had it. To be fair, they've had a year of not having. They might have had a couple of podiums. They definitely had a double podium in Brazil last year. But yeah, you would have thought even with a year of not winning anything, you'd still be happy getting on the podium. But I guess they're still looking at it going, we're used to winning, and that Red Bull. Well, to be fair, everyone's admitted that Red Bull is dominant. Even Hamilton and Russell have said that that Red Bull is just we can't catch it.
Yeah, to quote the first round, in fact, in the post race interview for George, it's like, well, season's over.
Yeah,
I mean, even he was going, oh, well, too late now, isn't it? It's like, it's round one of 23, is it?
yeah.
I mean, don't give up yet. So, for whatever reason, that the camp isn't as buoyant as it usually is, despite when you put it in context, right? You see how dominant the Red Bull is. I think you're totally right, though. Actually, now I think about it, they are they do have very very high standards, and if they don't hit them, well, it's not working. Something's wrong, even if it is a P2, because they would probably argue we're the first loser. But I think it's a different mentality for the driver, the one who sat in the car going through all the emotions and the adrenaline and the dopamine or whatever the hell you want to call it, in terms of you know how they handle their emotions in the car. And when you cross the line, you got this massive relief that the team won't understand because only the driver can feel that. I'm not saying the team doesn't get elation from these kind of results or doesn't feel emotion. Of course they do, but for the driver going through that strain all race for how many 58 odd laps, it means a lot more, I think, due to the emotions being heightened. So maybe that's why the discrepancy between Lewis's reaction and the team's reaction was probably a little bit more obvious. So, but then so Mercedes are always in the limelight anyway. So if any other team had this reaction, does anyone care? I don't know. Probably not.
No, but like I said, you would be a bit suspicious if like a team like McLaren or Alpine got on the podium and they weren't cheering to their full
Hmm.
effect. You'd be
Right?
like, "There's something up here. Like you've achieved something that you
Yeah.
you haven't done for a while." So yeah, so same with Merck. But like you said, yeah, I mean Lewis is always very sort of very happy. He was quite gracious and happy that they got a P2. And I think he's sort of really realised the situation of it and where the car was last year and how much the car's
Hmm.
improving. And also I think personally with Lewis, particularly over the past few years, he's sort of learnt to appreciate what he's doing and appreciate what's happened. Like there was one point at Silverstone a few years ago, 2017, 2018. He got punted at turn one, lap one, and then had a great race and fought all the way back up to third, and then was just miserable at the end because he was like, I didn't win. And and like
Right.
the only
Yeah.
way he was interviewed is Martin Brundle ambushed him on the podium as he was getting off the podium. That was the only way they got an interview from him. And I think sort of people were like, Lewis, you've been a bit of a miserable git. Like, don't be so privileged about winning all the time. Like, appreciate what you're doing. Not many people can do this. And you've been in for a long time
Right.
as well, 2008. And like, there's only
Hmm.
I think it's just him and Alonso actually, sort of pre 2010.
I think you're right. Yeah. No one else comes to mind that was 2009 or let's say 2008 or 9, or even before. No, that's right. It was the
Ricardo was
last two.
2011, but he's gone as well.
Right. So even in the reserve driver role, it's still not even close. Again, Hulkenberg close.
Oh,
So
Hulkenberg was
yeah,
2010. Hulkenberg was 2010.
Hulkenberg was 2010. Magnussen was 2011. I think was that his debut season. He went in with McLaren
No, that's
with
that was
Jensen.
2013 after Lewis
Or
left.
2013. My knowledge is encyclopedic, I must say.
Particularly for
Since we've
McLaren,
got Matty,
yes.
honestly. Yeah, absolutely correcting me on that one for sure. But Hulkenberg was teetering on that border, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
So in terms of pre 2010, I think you're right.
just
Yeah,
Lewis and Fernando, yeah.
just Hamilton and Alonso. Yeah, it was extraordinary, really. Over
And
a
they were both
decade
on the
now, it's
podium.
amazing. They were both on the podium, exactly. Which brings us really nicely into Aston Martin's race, which again, another really strong showing. Which, I was always thinking, yeah, they've had a strong start to the season, but can they keep it up? They're only round 3, but they are. They really are. I mean, fantastic.
Yeah,
Absolutely brilliant
they've
race.
really taken me by surprise because I mean, back when they were Racing Point, they were doing quite well, and I think their last year of Racing Point, they just pipped McLaren, or I think they would have pipped McLaren if they didn't have the penalty for something, the copying the brake ducts or something.
Mm,
So like they were fighting for fourth a lot of the time as Racing Point, and then they went to Aston Martin, and then they were fighting the Haas's and the Williams for a good couple of years. Even sort of last year, they were sort of mid-tier at best, and now they're
yeah.
just like, hang on a minute, what are you doing? Being really really quick.
Yeah, where do they come from? Where do you come from? I mean, Ferrari must be furious. They must be absolutely furious. But, I mean, just on qualifying alone, they were already 4th and 6th on the grid. Extremely strong performance. When, what it's really supporting is this idea that they've got the whole package at the moment. As a front-running team, they have the package. It's not like they're just producing good qualifying or producing a big drive through the field up to some points. They are qualifying well and also racing well because they ended up, after the fraught affair that was the Grand Prix, particularly towards the end, we'll get to that, is 3rd and 4th.
which is
One of them,
which is Aston Martin's best ever result, like combined, their best ever result.
yeah, absolutely extraordinary result. And when you consider the fact that Alonso went round on the restart at the end of the race, and Lance obviously is still technically recovering from
Yeah, of course.
a broken wrist and toe, I find it even more staggering how good that car must be because both of them are still in a spot to compete, and I think they're thoroughly enjoying it. They must be compared to how things were. But then again, obviously, in Alonso's case, yeah, probably, even though he transferred to Aston Martin for the season, Lance has always been there. He's under his dad's ownership. He's been around, and it's been working. It's been working this season, and it's clear to see that they've got the package to go forward for the rest of the season, I think, because the litmus test is race 1, and it's like, right, can you keep it up? In Aston's case, yeah, we can.
And what's really impressive with them as well is a lot of people forget they've created a brand new factory and moved into a brand new factory. So yeah, that's helped the production of the car, but you've got all the teams still focusing on we're moving to a new venue and we're moving all the kit and all the stuff is new, and so there's a lot of not quite turmoil, but like a lot of disruption at base because they're moving. So the
Yeah,
fact that they're still able to make a car that's, you know, double, 3 times better than what they've had for the past couple of years, and be fighting the Red Bulls and the Mercs is astonishing considering everything
yeah.
that's going on.
Exactly. It's a sport where it is notoriously difficult to make up a position, let alone move from mid to lower end of the field to a front runner. And they are.
Yeah.
Because look back at it was Bahrain. At some point Alonso had the lead. So, you know, it says it all when, when you look at that, compare that to Melbourne, again, Red Bull pipped at the start. So maybe there's some imbalance there in terms of tyre heating on formation lap. Maybe cost them a little bit. But either way, yeah, they are in the fight at the moment. And I think it must be so refreshing for Fernando that he's got a car that he can compete at the front with.
Oh yeah.
And you can see the difference in his demeanour at the moment. His attitude has completely changed for the better. And whether that's just because the car's quick or whether he took time out of F1 for a little while and then came back, maybe seeing the sport a little bit differently, and he's also got, finally, a car that can give him the opportunity to fight near the front. I think this is perfect timing for the over 40 now, isn't he? So amazing. It is amazing. Story of Fernando.
Yeah, because I think the last competitive car he had was probably the 2012 Ferrari, which was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to reminding everyone 2012 was 11 years ago. Oh God.
That is atrocious, isn't
but
it?
but I think that was the last competitive car because that's when he challenged Vettel for the championship and lost it on the final race. Ironically, losing it because Paul di Resta crashed a few laps from the end, and they brought out the safety car, and the championship finished under the safety car. Michael Massey, are you listening? That's how that championship ended. So, but yeah, that's sort. It's been a long time. Like I said, he came out of he left Formula One after having so many terrible cars. The Ferrari started being bad. He went to McLaren when they had the Honda engines, and those were just atrocious. And then, yeah, and coming back, and the Alpines weren't great either. And I mean, everyone was questioning, is this right going to Aston Martin? They're at 7th at best, and is this the right move? And Fernando, you're famous for making terrible moves. This one's paid off. Absolutely, it's actually worked. And like you said, he's had the few years off, which is what I think encouraged him to come back as well, because he won the 24 Hours of Le Mans and was at the front. He was he didn't win sadly, but he was extremely competitive in IndyCar, and particularly the Indy 500. He was at the front of that. Only losing out to, I think, mechanical failures actually is the only reason he hasn't got the Triple Crown.
I think you're right. Yeah, in the case of IndyCar, it was. Yeah, that's for sure.
So yeah, it's
ironically in a Honda engine.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be So I think he had a good perspective of what it was like to be back in a competitive car at the front, and then was like, I can try it again in F1. And he's probably happy with. Very happy with the Aston Martin. And I'll be interested to see. I don't think there's any plans this year, but I know Alpine blocked him from doing IndyCar because McLaren were happy for him to do it, obviously, because McLaren have a team in both. Alpine said no. Right. I don't know what Aston Martin's stance is on it. Obviously, he'd have to miss a race like Monaco, but I don't know Aston Martin's stance about letting Fernando go for a race weekend to go and compete in IndyCar. I guess Aston Martin don't have any associations with any teams, so I don't know who he'd be able to go with if he did, and I think they'd probably be upset if he went to McLaren over there. But again, I don't know what Aston Martin's stance is on letting him do IndyCar. But like I said, he's actually got a competitive car, and doing IndyCar will probably mean he'll have to miss Monaco like he did back at McLaren.
Yes, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think if there's one race where Aston could genuinely win with Alonso, it's Monaco, isn't it? Because if they could nail a quali lap in the way that Schumacher did on his return, like a decade ago, again, feel very old, if he could nail a quali lap, we've seen what can happen even with a dodgy car. You can still win at Monaco.
Yeah, Ricciardo did that. So, yeah.
Exactly. So this is the thing, isn't it? It's like with McLaren, they were a backmarker / midfield. So he could justify to the team, and the team could justify to themselves why it was okay for him to go. Like, well, you're probably not going to win here. You could win an IndyCar.
And we only let Jenson
Go on.
Button go last year, and we can just bring him back because it wasn't that long ago.
Correct.
Jen-
Pun likes this.
Jenson still has a penalty to serve. Did you know this this fun fact? Because he collided with Verline, and Verline went up on his side. They gave Jenson a 5-place grid penalty for the next race, but he only did that race. So
Oh
if
my
Jenson
God.
Button ever returned for a one-off race, he will be given a 5-place grid penalty from 2017.
So who is he most likely to jump back in for? Probably Williams.
Williams,
right?
I think.
His
He's
affiliation. Yeah.
So,
So can he qualify 15th?
Yeah, but I think that would be a record in itself. Here's a penalty
right.
from like 5 years ago. Enjoy.
Yeah.
You're still due to serve this.
Yeah, imagine if it's the same weekend that Alonso's gone off to IndyCar
You're
as well,
at Monaco.
But it's
You
not
have
in
to
the
start
same team.
Oh no, that'd be awful because he's in a Williams at Monaco. You have to start at the back, Jensen.
He already had to deal with the McLaren at that point as well. You know, that's what got him the penalty. And if I recall rightly, it was Verline in the Williams, I think, wasn't it?
Sauber.
I mean, Sauber, sorry, because they were. Oh no, sort of. But
they were blue, yeah.
Yeah. With where Aston are at the moment, I think it's an indication that Alonso's attention will remain squarely focused on Formula One.
Yeah.
As much as there might be a little bit of temptation about the Triple Crown, it's like, what if he goes to IndyCar and breaks down, and Lance gets a podium or a win? And that's nothing against him, by the way. I just mean Alonso's quicker of the two.
I agree.
So if he gets a podium or a win, it's an indication that Alonso will be kicking himself, right? He'll be kicking himself. Even if he goes to IndyCar and wins, he might end up being a little bit gutted that he wasn't around in F1 for Monaco. So I think it's probably going to be quite an easy decision, actually. And one that Aston won't have to justify to themselves or to Alonso very much. Because I don't think he's going to be that worried. I think he's quite happy with where the team are.
Yeah, I don't.
And he's got something to work with.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go. Well, I said there's no plans this year, and while Aston Martin are competitive, I don't think they're going to go. If they were in the same place that they had been for the past 2 years, he might have then. And maybe if it was like not on an F1 weekend, well, that's unlikely because it nearly always is. If it wasn't on that weekend, he might be like, "Can I go?" In which the only risk is you might have another driver with a broken wrist. So
yeah,
I think that'd be their
disaster.
worry as well, is that he'd hurt himself at Indianapolis, which is quite highly likely with the speeds that they do there as well. So
exactly, yeah, you're weighing up the threat and the opportunity, right? And as far as I'm concerned, when it was Alonso at McLaren, the opportunity massively outweighed the threat because he was at a team that wasn't very competitive. But now it's a much more balanced situation.
Yeah.
And given he's already full-time in F1, it's much easier to say, just stay here.
It would be. But I still hope he goes for it, like, whenever he retires for a second time.
So do I.
I want him to go for it. I want him to be the second driver to... No, he would be the second. Graham Hill did get all 3, didn't he?
Second driver. Graham Hill, exactly. Yeah, he was the first. So, be the second one ever.
Yeah.
That was the appeal at the time, wasn't it? And he was there or thereabouts, apart from his retirement, sadly, when he had the best attempt of the lot to get that victory and claim the crown. But no, I think, you know what? Within Formula One, he's going to be perfectly satisfied with how things are going right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Max, 2-time champion, Lewis, 7-time champion, then Alonso in an Aston, 2-time champion. I think he's going to be pretty satisfied with that, gotta be honest. And of course, Lance as well. No championships, more podiums than Hulkenberg, and comes in 4th as well, just behind him. I think it's a really good result for Aston, for sure.
Oh.
And a team that were probably hoping for a lot more than they got, for various reasons, was Ferrari. Where do we begin? Torrid start.
Let's start at the start. Charles Leclerc didn't get past sector 1.
No,
He went in.
he
He went
didn't.
in the gravel, and rather than sitting in the car hoping to be lifted back onto the track or be pushed back onto the track, he just got out of the car. I'm sure
Yeah,
that's not. I'm sure that's in
I'm
the. I'm
stuck.
sure that's in
That's
the
it.
regulations now, because I remember Lewis doing that at Nürburgring again, like 2007, 2008. He got lifted up and put back on the track, but he kept the car going so he could continue. I'm
That's
sure that's
right.
against the rules now to do that.
It
But
is. If you need to be recovered, you're not getting back in the race. Basically,
fine, yeah,
you need to be able to get out of your own steam. So that's the problem. If you just go in the gravel and your car's fine, you're still out. So yeah, that was the big issue for him. Really, is that he didn't really get a look in before he was.
again,
Was he spun out? I think he was.
this
Or
is
did he
what I was
just lose of
wondering.
his own
I can't
accord?
remember if he was. Yeah, I can't remember if he was spun out or when I've quite a few. So many people went in the gravel. I can't remember how many people
Yeah,
went in the
I
gravel.
know. Oh, it was a long, long list, particularly under the restarts. It was just turn one in general, really. Um, would be the summarizing point from the whole race. But in the case of Charles, yeah, just didn't get going. Um, and I think I get the feeling there was a little bit of contact there, and whether that's just therefore a bit of bad luck for him or it's quite uncharacteristic. I know there was the incident at the French Grand Prix last year, but it's still fairly uncharacteristic for a driver of his caliber to be making mistakes like that. So I think it's predominantly down to a little bit of contact, but again, really dreadful start. So it was all riding on Carlos to bring it home and get some decent points, and it was looking that way until the very end of the race when him and Alonso were going through turn one on the exit. The two come together, and Alonso goes spinning round. And the key point from this, I think, is well, as a result of that crash, the FIA awarded a 5-second penalty for avoidable contact, presumably. Um, and I heard some of the radio from Carlos to the team begging the team to implore to the FIA to hear his side.
Yeah, he was almost crying in the car when they told him,
Yeah.
because it was very it was. So the 5-second penalty is just, I feel, but the circumstances that it was in, that they knew it was going to be a safety car finish, was
Yes.
him being crucified. Like he knew they might as well have just disqualified him there and then, because there was no hope. If there was still like at least 2 laps of running, you might have been able to pull out a gap, but there
Mm.
wasn't. The fact that everyone was going to be backed up, and all the drivers behind knew that they were going to be backed up. Um, that they all had to be right behind Sainz, in which they all were, and he fell all the way back to last place, which was 12th, and didn't score a point. Yeah, but that was really harsh for it. And then obviously there are a lot of criticism as well. They handed him a penalty, but why didn't Sargent get a penalty for doing the similar thing to De Vries at the same corner? And De Vries's race was
Exactly.
over because De Vries ended up in the gravel and Sargent hit him. And they were just like, yeah, we're not going to look at that because you were, I don't know, you were 15th and that was for third. So, like, why didn't you penalise that?
Yeah.
Like, I know he's at the back, but it's
Yeah.
still the same thing. And actually, De Vries' race was over. At least Alonso could continue. Even, all right, there was a red flag 30 seconds later, but at least Alonso could still race, and his race wasn't over, but De Vries's was. So, yeah, again, as I said before, the big inconsistency from the FIA.
It is, and I agree because there's a lot of low-profile incidents, shall we say, the ones that tend to happen near the back of the grid that are just forgotten. Right?
Saudi
You
Arabia.
almost be forgiven,
Saudi Arabia, with Alonso
right?
getting his penalty for being out of his grid box. There's photographs showing that there was like 4 other drivers behind him who were in the same position as Alonso, slightly to the left or right of the grid
Yeah.
box, but because they weren't front row, they weren't noticed.
No, that's right. Exactly. And this is where I think, do they need more automation on this kind of stuff then? Because either they are accidentally missing it because there's too much going on, or they are deliberately
No, I
missing
think it's
it.
accidental.
Because I'd hope so. I genuinely hope so. I don't mean to come across that way, honestly. It's more just the fact that there's been this big drive for the FIA, particularly the stewarding, to be much more consistent than it was in the wake of 2021. They have said we've made all these changes to make sure that we are more consistent with our delivery of penalties going through the season. I'd love to know if they could still justify that now, because as you say, there's scenarios that they're missing, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of emphasis on making sure the front drivers are penalised because, well, it has an impact on the championship. But to be fair, there's still impact for lower end teams in terms of budget.
Yeah.
When you've got the likes of Haas and Williams and AlphaTauri and like Alfa Romeo, even McLaren now, arguably, are all in that lower end, and there is big points between those championship positions. So when you accidentally miss these incidents, it has a big knock-on effect on the championship further down the line. Because even if you don't score points, your position counts.
Yeah.
To later on, and that could be big money. And those teams will look back and go, "We could have done with that decision. We didn't get it."
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a tricky one to call, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because if like you said, if there's two teams that haven't scored any points, it's whoever finishes highest. Again, my mind casts back to again the early 2010s with Caterham and Marussia and HRT. I think there was one year none of them scored any points, but like the Caterham was 11th, so they got the bigger prize pool out of those back three teams because they finished ahead. So and that was just in one race. So that gives them it. So yeah, it does have a knock-on effect. Even this early in the season, just being given, yeah, this a place, even if it's 13th, it can still really help.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously in this scenario, we lost, let me see, 8 drivers. I had to just check my notes there. We lost 8 drivers,
I
right?
thought it was 6.
So
It was
in this
that bad.
context, there was only 2 positions that were non-scoring at the end of the Grand Prix. And
Yeah.
as a result, this one would be less impactful for that reason in terms of, teams that don't score points still getting some movement through the championship because of where they finished in the race. There's less impact there, but there's still big opportunity for teams such as McLaren, who made absolutely huge gains. But I know we'll move on to that. But just I mean, for Carlos, it's just absolutely devastating, really. When it seemed like quite a heavy penalty, and I think his justification, I don't know if he was able to make this to the stewards or not. He was saying it's basically a lap 1 restart. Yeah. So are we not taking that same approach to stewarding when there's a grid restart mid-race as we would on lap 1? It's the same principle. And I think that was his argument, is like, this seems, I think what he was trying to get across is you wouldn't do this normally for a lap 1 incident. Yeah. When it's the same kind of scenario where everyone's on the grid, everyone pulls away, race down to turn 1 is looking for the same piece of tarmac. It's the same deal. And he's going, how is this any different to a lap 1? Therefore, do I deserve 5 seconds or not? Therefore, by that argument, you could say, maybe it was a bit harsh. But then they're probably going for it's mid-race. Sorry, you hit him. Could have been avoided, something. But, yeah, I'm up for debate this one.
Again, inconsistency with really FIA. It comes back to the same thing.
I think so.
I think it needs to, I think that is a grey area that they need to look at, particularly now, because definitely within the past few years there's been a lot more red flags for races, lots more than there has been over the past 2 decades. And they need to really nail down going, okay, if it's a restart, doesn't matter if it's halfway through the race, 70% through the race, or on the last lap, are we treating turn 1 incidents as the same as it's turn 1 lap 1? Which as right. in the situation that you said, everyone's piling down there, everyone's going at the same speed, everyone wants the same bit of tarmac. Yeah, you should treat it as a lap 1 incident rather than a rather than the last lap incident.
I agree. So yes, more inconsistency, and I'm sure that won't be the last we talk about it. We are consistent
Yeah.
on the inconsistency. Tell you what, really are. Looking ahead at some of the teams that had a good day, and one of them was McLaren. Not biased at all. They've had a torrid start to the season, but they most certainly capitalised on a very tricky day for other teams by coming in, let me see, 6th and 8th. Gaining Lando was 6th, Oscar was 8th, gaining 7 and 8 positions respectively. Absolutely top draw for a team that were probably thinking, we're midfield now. Uh-oh.
Yeah, it was great to see them again finally actually getting a double points finish. Again, we were sort of slightly biased, so we want them to have double points finishes all the time. But it's good seeing that, and actually, I saw a lot of people actually comparing the fact that the Oscar, or it wasn't the debut race, but his debut home Grand Prix. So many people were comparing it to Mark Webber's debut in the Minardi in 2002,
Like that.
where he was in a slow car and he came through in the points. Mark Webber got 5th in the Minardi, which the fact it was a Minardi was remarkable. And I think this is the last.
Yeah.
I think this is the only other time that an Australian on their home race debut has gotten points. So like since Mark Webber. Actually, no, he is Australian. I was about to say he's Kiwi. No, he's not.
Oh no,
No,
he's certainly
he's
Australian.
He was born in Melbourne. He grew up in that area. I don't know why. I don't know
Ah.
why I thought he was Kiwi. Thinking of someone else.
Bruce McLaren.
Technically, yeah.
He's got the heritage, right? He's one with the heritage. He started it all. So,
Exactly.
what footsteps to fall into, right? In that region specifically, is a hell of a shoes to fill. And he has been, to be fair. Oscar's been, I must say, he's been impressive at the start of this season, I would say. Bad luck in the first race, obviously, and has been with Lando, right? Which I didn't expect. I thought there'd have been a bit more of a gap there. But, I mean, for example, you look at Albon and Sargent, then you look at Lando and Oscar. Oscar's doing well by the rookie standards.
Comparatively to his teammate, yeah.
Yeah, even Tsunoda and De Vries. The rookie performances, Oscar is closest to his teammate out of the three. And I think you should take his hat off. And he's got his first championship points of the season for the team as well, with a P8. And ultimately, what it shows is, it shows yet again, is you stay out of trouble, you probably score well. And that's exactly what happened with McLaren. They just kept finding themselves in the right place at the right time. For most of the race, really. And obviously, Lando pulled off that great move, mentioned it earlier about that great move on Nico as well, which was what gave him 6th at the end of it, because obviously with Carlos's penalty, he got bumped down to 12th, basically last out of the runners at the end of the race. But it gave Lando and Oscar that bump up the field up to 6th and 8th. So really, really strong for the team. And I think they'll be breathing a sigh of relief that there's some good points on the board considering where they are on pace.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, the team admitted at the launch and at practice that the car wasn't ready. They admitted that this car was going to be a bit bad. And again, I think they brought some upgrades to. And no, I don't. Again, I can't remember. I'm getting confused between either they brought something to Australia or they're bringing more upgrades to Azerbaijan. I think they're bringing more upgrades to Azerbaijan, and I think that's when McLaren are sort of going to stake their claim and be like, "We're here now," and it's sort of the final pieces that they've been missing. But the fact they've got points on the board as well, because before Australia they were plumb last in the standings. Because again, other teams, Williams and Haas, who hadn't scored points, they had scored better. So McLaren were plumb last, and now they've got points, so they've jumped from 10th to like 6th or something like that, I think. So they've
Yeah.
jumped up the standings and actually got some points on the board. Which again, if for a team that's struggling, you look over the past few years at Haas and Williams, just getting 2 points is really, really good. I don't want to quote Gunther Steiner for what he said of for 2 points what he would have done to the paddock, but
What if
he
Zach Brown feels the same?
hugged them. He wanted to hug to the paddock.
He wanted to hug them, to be clear.
Yeah, but like for 2 points, and McLaren got way more than that, and that'll be really, really beneficial, even if it doesn't go anywhere else beyond this even if that's their best race, that will still do them a lot of good.
Absolutely. Yeah, they'll be dead chuffed with that, and I'm sure they are. Had a few little celebrations behind the scenes about that particular result, because you have to put it in context, don't you? I know they'll probably set their standards high because they've had a few podiums in the last couple of seasons, and they'll probably be thinking, that's our expectation, isn't it? Let's get some podiums. Let's get a pole as well, maybe. So to be where they are is probably a bit demoralising, but you take those results, say, look, we got some points today, we had a good one, enjoy it, you know. I hope they did. I hope they did.
Yeah, sort of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back type deal for McLaren.
Yes.
Because they were progressing so well, and then this is a step back. And to be fair, they've admitted it, and they have sort of lowered their expectations somewhat for this season. Pretty much everyone has admitted it, even Zach Brown and both the drivers have admitted this car isn't going to be great.
Sadly, not hitting the mark yet. So they sadly are relying on results like this, races like this to capitalise, but that was a lot about luck. A lot about luck, and you need to be in the right place at the right time, and they were on this occasion, but can they bank on that being the case every single time there's a fraught race like that? Quite sure. You just have to be in the wrong place, and then your race is done. Which was the case for one of the Haas drivers. The other one did okay. Obviously, Lando getting past Nico into what was P7 at the time. Then Carlos's penalty pushed them forward. Nico then came through in P7. So a strong showing for the Haas team. Same couldn't be said for Kevin, though, who, as I recall, toward the end of the race, overstepped the mark a bit. And smashed his rear tyre onto
lightly tapped the wall of the exit of turn 2. Such a light tap, and it just should completely rip the wheel off. So it was
right?
a really big reaction from a tiny bit of contact. I watched that replay sort of in disbelief. I was like, no, surely he stepped out, or the back stepped out or something. I was like, no, he just slightly grazed it, and it broke. Haas seemed to not like wheels being attached in Australia. They have a gremlin with that, with wheels not being attached correctly. So yeah, so it was a surprise and a big shame for Kevin, and a really big shame for Hulk with how they restarted that final restart. Again, it was the correct procedure because there was, they hadn't gone through the first sector, and that's what you do if it's red flag pretty much at turn 1, which it sort of more or less was, and you can go back. Amazingly, some consistency from the FIA. They've done this in the past and reset and gone back to it. But if they, and this is why Haas are protesting, because if they hadn't reset it at that restart when they lined up in the pit lane, Hulkenberg was 4th, and then Sainz was given a penalty. Right. So Hulkenberg would have been 3rd, and the F1, everyone in F1 would start screaming, right? Because Hulkenberg would have got a podium.
Exactly.
Chaotic Australian Grand Prix.
Finally.
So, and it would have been Haas's first podium, but more importantly, Hulkenberg's. Yeah, and then because they reset it, he went back down to whatever position he was in, and then scarily, it wasn't on the main broadcast, but terrifyingly, his engine gave up, like on that final lap, going around behind the safety car. Yeah, he was going through the last couple of corners, and he was saying something's not feeling right, and going down the straight towards the line, he was like, the engine is going, the engine is gone, and they were just like, keep going, keep going, keep going. He crosses the line, and then they're just like, okay, Nico, stop the car, stop the car, stop the car. So like his
Oh
engine
my
actually gave
god.
up on the line. So
Wow.
it was lucky that he was there again, and that's what some of the commentators were like. Is like, this is why we should have this final parade lap and not end it, because someone's engine could conk out. Like, and that almost
Right?
happens. Like,
It was
really
very
close.
fine margins.
Yeah, yeah.
Oof.
The
God.
the the Haas almost didn't cross the line on that safety car restart, and
Wow.
that would have caused more drama to it. But thankfully it did. So I can't remember what place
Yeah.
he was in. I'm assuming he was in the points. Um,
Yeah. He came across the line in P8 behind Lando in 7th, but then Carlos's
and then
penalty
seventh, yeah,
brought all of
put him
those
in
up
seventh.
forward. So he finished 7th, yeah, having gained 3 positions from his starting spot. So he still qualified in the top 10. So really positive weekend for
Mm.
for Nico, and I'm not sure if Gunter would have survived the aftermath if that Haas hadn't crossed the line, given that only it was a
I've
matter
got
of
to call
laps
Dean
earlier
now.
that Kevin. Yeah, right. No hugs today. No hugs today. Just a lot of smashed doors. Uh, I mean, yeah, it would have been absolutely dire. So it's encouraging again that they were able to get it across the line, but
Yeah, and
very, very fine
going
margins.
back to like what I said with sort of the comparison of celebration with Mercedes, Haas. I didn't see any celebrations, but I'm sure they're incredibly thankful. You know, finishing 7th and getting 4 points. Um, for finishing 7th
Yeah.
is fantastic. Again, Gunther said he'd hug the whole paddock just for 2 points. So I
Yeah,
mean, I saw a
right.
comment. I think I saw a comment saying I dread to think what he'd do for 7 or for 7th place, 4 points or whatever it was. So, um, but yeah, they can be happy with that, because again, it's been a long time for Haas. Lots of pointless seasons. You know, they got some points last year and they got pole position last year, but
Exactly.
yeah, the actually being in the points and having quite a, you know, and he was there the whole time pretty much. You know, like you said, he sort of gained 3 places from his qualifying position, and yeah, eight people DNF'd, but he gained 3, which meant that he kept a lot of them behind. You know, he
That's right.
didn't lose those places crucially. So yeah,
That's right.
he
Exactly.
they've got pace there. They have the Haas, and they can probably consistently be scoring points, which will be a huge relief to them.
Definitely. Definitely. It just gives more support to how close the midfield is, including Alfa Romeo, who had a very, very strong outing as well. Both drivers gained 8 positions each, with Zhou in my notes 9th, and Valtteri was in 11th. One of them only getting points, but still a very, very strong outing for a team that qualified poorly,
Mm.
very poorly. Which is why they've ended up, well, first of all, staying in the race and getting to the checkered flag without any issues, and gaining all those places in the process as well. So I think it's an interesting one for Alpha. It's like McLaren, isn't it? Where you have to be in it to win it, in the sense that in order to capitalize on those issues that other teams have, and in this case, there's 8 drivers that crashed out. So you know, I think they just they capitalized, didn't they? It wasn't necessarily pace; they just stayed in the race, didn't they? I mean, what else can more be said in that
Yeah,
respect? I'm
I
not
mean,
quite sure.
to be frankly, I just forgot where they finished. They had such an uneventful
Right?
race. Despite everything that happened, they had a really uneventful race, which is what you want in a really chaotic race. You don't want anything to happen to you. All right, you only
Yeah.
come away with 2 points, and there was only 2 places where you couldn't score points, and you're one of them. That's a bit gutting.
Hmm.
But yeah, just still coming through, and I mean, that's my strategy for league races: qualify at the back, just let everyone else have a crash, and then come through and score some points. Um, yeah, but
Worked well in the past.
yeah, it worked in the past, and it's work. It worked for Alfa Romeo that weekend as well. So yeah, they managed to come through. Yeah, uneventful. Both cars finishing, and which is still better than most. It's not the
Yeah,
points, and it's not anything to write home about on a normal weekend. But yeah, just sort of surviving through it. I mean, I'm actually trying to think. both Red Bulls. Both I'm trying to think what teams both had both cars finished. Both Red Bulls, both Aston Martins, both McLarens. Probably
And both Alphas.
and both Alphas. Yeah, so there wasn't
That's it.
there
Yeah.
wasn't many teams. There was only like 4 teams that actually had both cars finish. So yeah,
Yeah, and the 2 stragglers. Yeah, exactly. I think you're absolutely right. It was only a smattering of teams that really, yeah, got through it unscathed. And I think, to be honest with you, at the end of the race, you got Alpha's pit wall just looking at each other, going, "Got ninth? We get ninth?
yeah,
Nice,
better
cool,
than what
all
we're
right."
hoping for. Yeah, because again, their car's sort of not that great. It hasn't been that great for the past couple of years either, and it's still
No,
not that great. So they're sort of getting any points, they're going to be thankful for them. Really, I think, not being disrespectful to the team, but that's sort of the situation that they're at. That they're just going to hope for points.
yeah, the midfield's become very mixed up in that respect. Like McLaren again are glad to get points, Alpha glad to get points because they were 2 teams that were solid midfield, touching on podiums at times, especially with Bottas at Alpha last season. And now they're both hoping for points. What a difference a winter makes, right?
Yeah,
It's amazing.
God, can you imagine if it was like in the 90s and early 2000s where the top 6 got points? Can you imagine how difficult it would be for teams nowadays? I don't know.
Oh,
I
just
was about to say I don't know how teams
brutal.
survived back in the 90s. No, I know they died. That's how they survived.
They didn't.
They
They didn't
They
survive
didn't
at all.
survive. That's so that's why these teams have been around for a long time. Yeah, but yeah, it's good result, decent result for them to get
Yeah,
points and be happy with that, and be one of 4 out of 10 to actually have both cars finish.
exactly. Pleasantly surprising day
Yeah,
for Alpha. And you had a strong result for Yuki as well for Alpha Tauri, who managed to come through and get that last point. So he split the Alphas. So has been carrying the flag at the moment for Alpha Tauri, and I think I'm glad they gave him a chance because he's showing why it was worth giving him a chance at the moment. He's definitely leading that team, and I know it's because De Vries is new to the sport. I put that in italics because of his Monza drive last year, but this is his first full-time year as a rookie, and doing one Grand Prix doesn't stop you being a rookie.
No.
Frankly, you are still a rookie. So yeah, looking at that, I mean, it's understandable. De Vries probably still getting up to speed a little bit, and then of course having that incident with Logan towards the end of the race. In fact, it was after the second restart.
Yeah.
That those 2 had to come in together right while all the rest of it was going on, and we'll get to that. But yeah, just De Vries probably was hoping for a little bit more, but probably wasn't going to be points. I doubt it. So they'll be glad they've got Yuki currently flying the flag for them because he drove very well and came away with a little point.
Yeah, I was about to say Yuki's consistent. No, he isn't. He's sort of famous for not being consistent. But no, but
Exactly.
he's driving smoother and going against what he thought, because when they re-signed him for the first time, he was surprised himself that they kept him on, because he was just like, I'm inconsistent. Sure, why are they keeping me?
Right.
But he is doing well. His 3rd season in the sport. So he is doing well, and like I said, but I know he is a rookie, but I am somewhat surprised of De Vries' lack of pace. Because
Yeah.
we know how good De Vries is. I mean, even if you argue it's the Alpha Tauri is not the greatest car, at Monza he was in a Williams, which arguably was potentially worse, and he still got a point.
Yes.
And that was his first ever time
Exactly.
at racing in the Grand Prix. And he's got his history of being a Formula E champion and won all the other lower divisions as well. And has been in the sport for a long time. I remember for first time seeing De Vries, I remember he was in the Tuned animated show. That's the first time I saw.
Oh
That's the first time
yeah,
I saw
yeah.
Nick De Vries. Young Nick De Vries was in the animated Tuned show back in 2012.
What a
Again,
throwback.
yeah, thrown back to there. So that was the last time he. Anyway, but yeah, I'm sort of surprised at his lack of pace. I know you said he's a rookie, and it obviously you don't expect to get up to to pace straight away, because a lot of them don't know. Yuki went through Formula 4, next year Formula 3, next year Formula 2, next year Formula 1. Incredibly fast pace. Again, Mick Schumacher took a couple of years each season, but then won the championship and then got into F1. Yeah, sometimes you do struggle there. So particularly for a couple of years as well, you can definitely struggle with getting
Yeah.
used to it all. So obviously, I'm not counting Nick out. I know he's a fast driver and know that he's gonna do well and hopefully consistently score points. AlphaTauri's not great at the moment for him. It's sort of like Alfa Romeo. It's sort of at the back, happy if you get points, sort of thing. Yeah, and if it wasn't for Sargent going into the back of him, he would have, AlphaTauri would have been the 5th team to have both drivers finish both cars, because he would have, he probably would have stayed there. But yeah, I'm sure De Vries will get up. I'm just sort of surprised by that he hasn't caught up to Yuki as quickly as, like, as you said, like Oscar Piastri's caught up to Lando. I'm surprised Nick isn't right there with Yuki, particularly knowing how quick he was in Formula E.
Exactly. I think the litmus test will genuinely be Monza this year. You've got a direct comparison from technically his debut to his first season, halfway through his first full-time season. How does it stack up, and like how much difference is there in his confidence and his performance in a different car? As Williams versus AlphaTauri, albeit a season apart. It'll still be fascinating to see how he stacks up there, because I think he will eventually give Tsunoda a run for his money, considering how quick he was at Monza last year. But time will tell. Is he just not adjusting to the car? Who knows? Looking ahead, I say ahead, we're actually looking back. Anything. We'll look at Williams as well, because, to be honest, they had a really tough day at the office. You got, initially, Albon going off on lap 6. I struggle to recall what corner. I suspect it was probably
10.
Turn 8 or 7. Is it 7 into 8? And he hit the tyre wall. And I think it's turn 7 or 8. But he lost the back end and just went careering into the tyre wall and instant DNF. That was the first red flag as well, actually. So not the day he was wanting. And then obviously it got worse for Williams when Logan collided with De Vries. So yeah, tough one, really tough one for the team. But I think they'll probably just call it a write-off, won't they? To be quite honest.
Yeah, well, they have
really tricky one.
They have to. Yeah, both cars in the gravel, effectively at the end of it. Yeah, and that's sort of where the sort of big argument for Albon's incident is: did they need the red flag? That's sort of the first argument, even when it was happening.
Yeah.
Because I think it was in commentary, Jensen Button was like, just put them behind the safety car, bunch them all up, then the marshals know where all the cars are, and you brush the gravel away while they're on the other side of the track. And that's what we've done before. So it sort of brought into question why it needed to have a red flag. It didn't change much, really, like actually stopping it and re-going didn't change much other than destroying George Russell's strategy. And anyone else who pitted, I think, under that safety car when it came out, and then they red flagged it. And sort of ruined their strategies because they pitted and no one else did, and then everyone got a free tire change. So yeah, it was sort of questionable whether that red flag was needed. But I mean, that was like lap 6, lap 7, and then nothing happened for another 50 laps. So it sort of didn't really change anything.
No, exactly. I mean, everything happens at the beginning. Nothing in the middle.
And then everything at the end.
Everything happens at the end. Yeah. Every single time, without fail, it's uncanny. It's uncanny. And there's way more support for it again this time. Another team that probably, on balance, had a worse day than Williams, if that's possible, was Alpine. So close to the end, bless them. And they hit each other
Yeah.
The two French drivers hit each other in a French team. Oh, just beggars belief.
Yeah, it was
Disaster.
It was. I mean, I know you don't have great visibility behind in F1 cars. It's still better than it used to be. With the mirrors are actually getting better, and you can see a fair amount. It was slightly careless from Pierre just to assume that he could, because he ran wide at turn one, and then was on the far inside for for turn two, where everyone was going to the outside of it, and he just drifted across onto the racing line, assuming no one would be there, and then found his teammates' front end, and they both went in the wall. Because the last person you want to hit is your teammate, and 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 that's what happened. And
Mm.
there was potential as well that like Alpine had a talk with both the drivers and said, both of you admit it was both your faults, because if it falls on Pierre's shoulders, he's getting a race ban. Which I
Right.
think I think he's got to hold that over his head until something like Canada or Monaco.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
the number of penalty points he's got, it's very fine. He's still got like a handful of races to not get any points, otherwise he gets a race ban. Yeah, somewhere like Canada or Monaco, these cleared. So, so I think that's what I think. The rumors are that Alpine talked to Ocon and said, admit some responsibility so Pierre can race in Azerbaijan.
Oh goodness me! If you could move at all in those seats, it'd be squeaky bum time.
Yes,
For him,
but again,
that's for sure. With teetering.
I guess that's the benefit of crashing into your teammate. That, you know, if you're in that position where if it's protested this was your fault, then you get a race ban. But if it's your teammate, they can say to your teammate, "Don't say it was his fault," and admit it was and force the idea that it's a racing incident. You're both to blame. Then he can get off scot free, which I think is sort of what it did. Again, people are going to see that and gonna be like, "Oh, but that's dirty politics and teams playing favourites and playing the system." Like, but that's happened since day one. So
I agree.
it's dirty, but that's been there in F1 since day one.
It has. Yeah, it's not going to change either. Sadly, it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
As far as that goes. Yeah, not a good day for Alpine. I mean, that they probably had the worst day of anyone just due to the circumstances of the incident. The fact that two teammates are colliding that close to the end of
Yeah,
the race
second
as
to
well.
last lap as well as not when you want it.
Disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. For a team that could have done with some points, and well, they may have been on for that. To be fair, just recalling the qualifying, it was ninth and 11th in quali for Alpine. So just to note that they were in the fight based on qualifying. So yeah, they'll be even more devastated about that for sure.
Yeah.
Really tough day.
Yeah. The other fact that I remember seeing with people commenting is you get a lot of the rivalry comments just going, well, Piastri should have gone with Alpine. Alpine are clearly better than McLaren this year. Piastri has the same number of points as Ocon currently. So
Wow.
it's not necessarily the better team at the moment. He's still sat level with them. So I know he's only scored once and there's been 3 races, but Alpine, unlike who we were talking about, it was lucky Haas. Unlike Haas, all the bad luck went to Alpine this race. So they
sure.
That's why you got to be in it to win it. And if you crash into your teammate, you're not going to score. No one's going to score any points.
To finish first you have to avoid your teammates' rear tire.
Yes,
that's the summary, I think. But yeah, fraught race, an absolutely fraught race. That I think was maybe needed from an entertainment point of view, perhaps. But still,
because there wasn't enough going on at that restart with Sargent going to the back of De Vries and Sainz spinning Alonso. There wasn't enough. We needed 2 Alpines crashing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All at turn 2.
We need some more smashed carbon, please. Yeah, this isn't enough yet. Perfect. Yeah, that's the cherry on top. That is 2 Alpines going off into the barrier. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And it wasn't even a wet race as well. No. Amazing. Amazing. God, well, that's the race, isn't it? That's the race. Um, More news though. Prior to this, I had a little browse, and it turns out that Toto Wolff has just become a billionaire, which is just insane.
Mm.
Absolutely insane. I don't. There's no other owners in this in Formula One, within the Formula One teams at least. There's no other owners who are in the billion mark, is there? In terms of an owner also being a shareholder, this is quite unique, and that's why it's being reported on so heavily. I think because he brought Merck back to, well, 8 championships,
Yeah.
including Nico's, obviously. 8 championships, and has also grown a sustainable business out of it. To the point where now he has a personal wealth of 1 billion euros, I assume.
Yeah.
But either way, yeah, a billionaire, extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, he's always been very clever with money. He's got a finance
Mm,
background, doesn't he? So he's
yeah.
very numbers driven. Um, but yeah, I mean, he completely transformed that Mercedes team, taking over from Ross Brawn. 2013. It was 10 years ago. They were talking about it. It was his debut with the team.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and they then started winning everything, and of course he then was quite smart, became a like major shareholder in the team, and then they started dominating, so his profits only went up.
exactly.
Stonks, as the meme goes.
Stonks indeed.
Which is but that's a well played thing to do. He invested in the team, he put a lot of his capital into it, and then it came back with a huge return.
Exactly. He's very savvy businessman.
Mm.
And I think by having ownership, by being a shareholder and an owner, it's easier to um I guess I'm trying to say is he's clearly passionate about the future of this
Yeah.
team, because there's owners who aren't shareholders and there's shareholders who aren't owners, and you can tell what their objectives are, right? Shareholders make money, owners help the team succeed. He is not only helping the team succeed, but is also producing a profitable, sustainable business in the process, which is just a triumph. It really is. In a sport that is as difficult as it is to compete in, he's managed it nearly perfectly, I would say, considering his wealth already. Not that he didn't have wealth before, sure, but most of his wealth growth has come in the last decade
Yeah. And
within Formula
but I
One.
think as well that actually the majority of this money that he would have got to make him a billionaire would have come through particularly shares of the company. Because unlike the drivers, or yeah, he's given a salary, but it's probably, I don't know how much team principals get paid, but it's probably not as much as he's paying Lewis. Lewis is probably getting
No.
a hell of a lot more. He doesn't get prize money from Formula One for winning races, personally,
No.
unlike the drivers. So the majority of of his wealth would have come from however much they've budgeted for him to have as the team principal, whatever the going rate is for a team principal. I know you can pay. I know you can pay finders fees and whatever, and like hire them. But he's been with them for years now, so I don't know what salaries he's agreed, and like they wouldn't have a finder's fee or try and pinch him from anywhere else. He's invested in the team, and yeah, and the shares, like I said, just investing in it early and it being successful. So that's where he's got the majority of that wealth from. It's not prize money.
Yeah.
It's not actually,
No.
well, it is to do with being on track, but it's not like physically being on track. It is just the success the team has created by being a successful team. He has managed to profit on the team being successful.
Yeah. On full circle, basically.
Yeah,
He feeds in, gets out.
yeah,
Feeds in, gets it out constantly, and it's worked to perfection so far. And I think he'll continue to do that because I don't see him stopping anytime soon. It's too determined. It's
mm,
too determined for its own good, I think. But yeah, really worth noting that one, because sky's the limit, frankly, in Formula One. And if Merck find themselves back actually at the front of the field again, it's only going to keep going. Only going to keep going. And a very healthy retirement.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of billionaire team owner. Is Bernie Ecclestone the only other one? Have there been any? Surely there's been more billionaire. Well, Stroll. Is Stroll a billionaire? Lawrence Stroll, billionaire?
um,
Because the only one that's going to my mind of team owners or maybe team principals as well that have had that much is Bernie, because he was a team principal of Brabham, wasn't he? And I think a
that's
couple
right.
of others. So, but I don't know.
And became an F1 Supremo. So yeah.
Yes.
Tell you what, let us know in the comments if you're still listening now. Let us know in the comments if Lawrence Stroll is currently a billionaire or not.
Yes,
And if there's been any other team principals in the past or present.
You could argue that Lawrence
billionaires.
Stroll isn't the team principal; he's the owner. He's not the team principal.
That's right.
Mike Crack is. I'm trying to say that without laughing.
Too late.
I'm sorry. He must be so sick of that.
Oh, he must be.
But
anytime he gets a phone call.
Yeah, but Mike Crack's the team principal. I can't say that without putting a smile on my face. I'm sorry. Yeah, but yeah,
Exactly.
I think
So it's a unique.
the only billionaire team principals, I think, have been, unless there's anyone other than Toto and Bernie. I don't think there was any others, even going back earlier.
No. It's a unique scenario because he's an owner, a shareholder, and a team principal, and all the above, right? It's a unique situation in the sense that not only does he own the team in this capacity, he has led the team to success, but he's made massive economic gains out of it as well. It's the full package. It's the whole triangle. It's absolutely amazing what he's been able to achieve with that team. From a financial standpoint and from a sporting standpoint, there's obviously blips in there, and we've on previous episodes of this podcast we've commented on some of the behaviour in interviews and perhaps how Toto's conducted himself to the press, and therefore how some of the drivers have conducted themselves to the press, including George. And yeah, that is a downside when you've got a team that's prided itself on its culture, but you can't deny they have nailed the economic side of it because it's working. Toto Wolff's a billionaire. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary. So hat off to him for the success, ongoing success. Really something quite special. It wasn't so special for one of the spectators, however, which Matt rightly brought up before we got started. One of the poor spectators got hit by some debris, although he seems to be pretty happy about it from some of the pictures I saw.
Well, it's a I don't want to say hit and miss because it very much was a hit story. He did get hit. It was from K-Mag's car. He was on the outside of turn 2. When K-Mag hit the wall, a bit of debris came off. I mean, nasty scar. It was sort of down his arm. And carbon fiber is sharp. So particularly when it's ripped off. So it would have been a nasty cut. Equivalent of being hit by a bit of glass or something. Like quite nasty.
Yeah.
But he seemed happy with it. He was in good spirits. But then the poor guy, someone stole that piece of debris because it hit him and he caught it.
No.
And then he went to the med center and someone took it. So he didn't even get to hold on to the piece of debris that cut him. He's got a scar and he's like, I don't know what happened to that. Someone stole it. So someone else claimed it. So he got an injury but didn't get to keep the weapon that hurt him.
Oh. It's a bit like being at a baseball game. The ball comes out, hits you in the head, or cricket actually.
Yeah, it hits you in the head.
The ball hits you in the head.
You get a concussion, but the person behind you gets it.
Yeah, someone else next. Well, you wake up, you come round. It's like, where's the ball?
Yeah.
What do you mean, where's the ball? It's gone. What? Right. It's like that.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like I took the pain. I don't get any gain. Come on.
Yeah.
It's about. So it looked like a nasty gash, but hopefully it was sort of patched up.
I believe he's totally fine. It was only a cut, and no damage. It didn't do any damage in his arm. Just a nasty cut that probably would have hurt. But yeah, he seems on social media. He seems in good spirits, other than having it nicked, and
good.
Yeah, and seems happy with it. Happy with the attention as well. I think he's being a bit. I don't want to say wholesome with the attention, but he's just like, no, I'm happy. People are seeing this, and I'm being funny.
It is. He got more than he bargained for. maybe not the piece, but he got more than he bargained for from that weekend. It's like that's a hell of an anecdote for the next few years.
Hmm.
You know, it's like I got cut by some debris at a Formula One race. What have you done?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the Melbourne Grand Prix weekend.
Well,
Because
I think there was still something else related to the crowd as well, because did you see that after the race, the Australian Grand Prix organisers were called to the steward's office? The
oh
the
goodness,
organisers of the Grand Prix were called to the steward's office because of the fans climbing the fences and trying to do the track
oh
invasion.
yes,
Attempted it a lap early. Even the commentators, David Croft and Jensen Button, noticed it, and they were like, "We hope security's down there." But security sort of wasn't down there. They thankfully didn't
oh,
they didn't get on the track while it was racing, thankfully. But I did see when the recovery tractor was in the gravel at turn one recovering to freeze his car, it was surrounded by crowd. They the
yeah,
crowd were there while this tractor was carrying a Formula One car. I mean, again, probably about 10 years ago or so, a marshal in Canada tragically died because he was helping a car on a crane and it came around and hit him on the head, and he tragically passed away from that.
goodness,
And the fact that these fans were there with no safety, just around these cars, obviously trying to touch, going, "Oh, I touched a Formula One car." It's just like, if that swings you round on the head and hits you on the head, there has been
I
examples
know
that could kill you. So it's
it's
that's why
absolutely.
the organisers were summoned to the stewards. I
Good.
mean, a lot of the comments were being funny, saying like it's going to be a 5-second penalty for the Australian Grand Prix, and 5-place grid penalty for them. I don't know how that's going to
They're
work.
serving it next year.
I don't know how it's going to work. You're going to be the 8th race in the season rather than the 3rd. I don't know. You're going down places in the season. Um, yeah, but they
Oh, it's bizarre,
yeah,
isn't
I
it?
don't know
So bizarre.
how they've how it's organised. I imagine a fine for them, but yeah,
It will
it
be a significant fine.
it was
Yeah,
on
I hope so. Anyway,
yeah, it was unsafe from the marshals letting yeah, and how
extremely.
people got on the track, because like the track invasion is still fun. I went to a Grand Prix Silverstone 2016. Track invasion is fun when it's done sensibly. They herd you in properly through the gates, and they're like, don't go. I was at Abbey at Silverstone, so turn one, they were like, don't go beyond turn one, only go down the pit straight. So as long as you do
Yeah,
that and go down there, and I think Jensen Button sort of joked as well, if you're going to nick anything as well, nick the marbles off the tarmac. No one cares about that. Don't be stealing the pit boards and things like that. So, and it's ironic that on the weekend that the FIA banned teams celebrating on the pit wall and sort of leaning out and climbing the fences, that the fans decided to do the same, which is arguably a lot more dangerous.
exactly. So I hope they got a. Well, they will have got a slap on the wrist, obviously, but hopefully a bit worse than that as well, because it's unacceptable in this day and age.
Yeah.
Can't be getting away with that anymore. We used to see it with Mansell when he won at Silverstone, obviously, and it's it's nice to look back on, but when you're still seeing that now,
It's
I
like
mean,
looking back at Group B rally and just seeing the
yeah,
spectators. That
yeah,
defined the edge of the track for rallying. You're hurtling a very uncontrollable Audi Quattro with a huge turbocharger, and your barrier is a line of humans. That's how rally was at the time, and that was accepted back then. And now you're just like, no, you can't be within 200 yards for obvious
no,
reasons. And same has to apply for Formula One. There are signs around everywhere. If you ever go to any racetrack, even go-karting racetracks, you will see constant signs saying motorsport is dangerous. And it
yes,
is. Take precautions. Don't be stupid.
exactly, yeah. Just bear it in mind. Things can still go wrong, even as a spectator. So yeah, it's sort of not just them taking their responsibility as a sport, as organisers to keep things safe. It's also about saying what risk am I willing to take, and am I what am I willing to tolerate, right? Because I guess when you're attending a Formula One race, it's all very exciting. It's this is new, or maybe it's not new, but either way, it's exciting to be there. And if an opportunity arises to charge onto the track, most people will take it because, well, where else be able to do this? Like,
herd
the guy
mentality
got his
is,
arm cut.
yeah,
It's a great anecdote. The herd mentality, exactly. Yeah, peer pressure. It's like, well, everyone else seems to be doing it. I'm not going to be caught. It's the same as a pitch invasion in football.
Yeah.
Same deal. Like, everyone else is doing it. They're not going to arrest all of us. So we're all going onto the track. So ultimately, the responsibility falls onto the organisers. Hence, why they got ferried in. And yeah, hopefully something comes of that. At the end of all this, and doesn't become a reoccurrence this season.
hopefully.
Let's hope not. But yeah, with that brings us to the end of episode 6 of Backmarkers with Kier and Hun. So this week it's Kier and Matt, and I'm very pleased you're able to join, Matt. It's been a great episode. Appreciate it, and of course, we hope Hun gets well soon. Of course, pulls through and rejoins again for a future episode, hopefully next week. So we'll get this out as soon as we can, and we'll be back very soon in your ears and from your eyes as well, maybe, like we are now. But with that, before I waffle on, make sure you follow us on all our socials. Say we're on YouTube to watch us, as well as on Spotify, Apple, and all other major podcast platforms. So do give us a listen if you want. And we appreciate all the good comments we've had so far. There've been plenty, and we really appreciate it. So we'll keep it moving, and yeah, hopefully we keep appealing to what your ears want to hear, you know. So yeah, with that, we'll draw this episode to a close. And thanks again, Matt, for joining. And good night.
Good night, everyone.